Okay. Happy Monday, everyone. I'm gonna be looking here for Natalie to put her on here. In case you didn't get the memo, tonight Natalie and I are gonna be talking about Speedy Speech, and we are absolutely stoked about it. Hello, people who are joining. I'm gonna get Natalie on here real quick. Maybe. Hello, people who are joining. I hope everyone has had a good Monday. For me, it was at least a fairly good Monday for Monday. Let's see. There we go. Very good. Natalie, I'm trying to add you and it keeps not letting me add you. Let's try this again. Oh, it's working.
Yay!
I was like, I'd click accept and then it would go down, and then I'd click accept and it would go down. I was like, oh no, but you're here, so this is good.
Yay! Hello.
I am super excited.
Me
Things
too.
like this make my week good because after a Monday, I mean, it wasn't a bad Monday, but things like this set my week on a good tone, so this makes me very happy.
Yes, I agree, especially after the day after Halloween.
Oh my goodness, I know, right? How was your Monday after Halloween?
We were very lucky in my district. We did not have students today. We actually do not have students all week. We have professional development and then parent-teacher conferences. So we
I
are very
forgot
blessed.
you said that.
Yeah, I know. I like how they worked that out, and then we're off on Friday. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
They planned ahead well.
I know they did. They did. It's been good. So.
I'm loving all our friends here who are like, hi, and hyping us up to powerhouses. Roxy, you're too much.
I know. Hey guys.
This is so fun. Okay.
Love it.
I think most people that are tuning in probably either know you, me, or both. But I figure while we're sitting here waiting for people to hop on, we can probably give brief introductions about ourselves, because
Yeah.
why not? Why
Let's
don't you
do
go
it.
first?
All right. So my name's Natalie. I'm an elementary speech language pathologist, and this is my third year. I work at an elementary school with this year we have just under about 800 students. So we actually have 2.5 SLPs at my school. My school also serves a lot of students that need high levels of support. We have a ton of special education at my school. I believe we have 8 special education teachers total, and a ton of paraprofessionals. So I am very blessed with all the support, and the collaboration is one of my favorite things of all time. That and inclusion are hot topics for me. So those are things I'm very passionate about. And so collaborating right now is like one of my favorite things about this Instagram. But yeah, that's kind of about me and my SLP journey and where I'm at right now. So
I love that. And for anyone who doesn't already follow Natalie, like, she's serious. Those things are her hot topics and she'll talk about them in detail. And I love that you always give like very clinically relevant things. Like, you don't just talk about it because it's a fun thing to talk about.
right.
So anyone who isn't following Natalie needs to do so right this second, because it just, like, it'll make your life so good. So
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I try to throw in some fun stories here and there too, because, everyone needs those SLP entertainment stories of the day.
right, that's how it gets us through everything.
Yep, exactly. Tell us about you, Callie. Tell us about your position.
I am fairly similar to you in terms of experience. This is also my third year as an SLP, so we're kind of twinsies in that way. I'm also an elementary school SLP. My caseload or my school is more of a preschool through 6th grade, mostly general education. I have one special education class, but probably more of just your typical elementary school that you would see. The one thing that is a little bit different about my campus is it's a bilingual feeder school. So over half of my caseload is Spanish speaking bilingual. So that is like my jam. I love
Yeah. Well,
diversity.
are you proficient in Spanish as well?
I am.
Okay.
So I'm at that campus, which makes me super happy because I get to use Spanish and that side of my expertise every day. So
Yeah, that's really cool.
that is perfect. So I'm sure we'll get to know more about you and me as we talk today, but
Yeah.
I'll cut to the chase since everyone came here to listen to us talk about Speedy Speech.
Yay.
And just so everyone knows, two things. We're going to talk about Speedy Speech, both in terms of what it is presented in like the literature or in publications, as well as how we've seen it done in our practice or how we've implemented it. So I always give disclaimers before my lives. Feel free to fact check, go, and after you listen to this live, please go and do additional research and learning on your end to see how it best fits your caseload. But hopefully what we give you today will be helpful and send you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Okay, with no further ado, let's go with what is Speedy Speech, because I was a little bit surprised when I put a poll and I said, do you know what Speedy Speech is? And the vast majority of people that participated in my poll said they didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us? Or we
Yeah, yeah.
can
I did something similar a couple months ago too, and that's why I ended up saving a highlight on my page because, I thought more people knew about it, and I would say maybe it is a little bit newer service delivery model. It's definitely a hot topic right now for sure. But Speedy Speech, what is it? So it's basically a change in service delivery for articulation, and for students that we serve with mild to moderate articulation or mild to moderate even fluency disorders. And what it is, it's quick. It's also known as quick artic or 5-minute speech. And instead of doing traditional speech therapy, where you pull a student to your room, a lot of us do that twice a week for 30 minutes. Instead of using that model, you actually only see the student for 5 minutes at a time, 5 to 10, and it's all individual based. And it's really about drill and learning that skill. And there's no fluff, there's no games, there's no, like little worksheets, not most of the time at least, just because you are doing a lot of education on what the sound is and then practicing and practicing in that 5 minutes and getting it all done. And then the student can go right back in class. So there's tons of benefits to Speedy Speech, but overall, I think the biggest thing to know about it is just a change, kind of a shift in mindset on how we can target and tackle articulation, especially for students who only have 1 or 2 sounds that they may be working on. So
for sure. And I think it's important too that you said it's a service delivery model. Some of the people who I talked to thought it was, there are programs that you can like purchase or programs that you can follow that outline the same approach, but you don't have to have one of those programs to have this service delivery model.
Right.
So I like that you emphasize it is a service delivery model. It is not necessarily one program, or it's not like one regimented way to do things. It's just an alternative way to serve your students. So I like that you hit that part, because that's how I always want to clarify things like that. It's like, just because you Google Speedy Speech and the first 3 results are businesses that provide, materials, doesn't mean you have to use a program to implement this kind of
exactly model. Yeah, the biggest tool I think is ourselves in this approach, because like we really, and I like this approach too, because you can spend a couple sessions if you need just working on education and sound, or just working on auditory discrimination. And it's great because when you're in groups with articulation, some students may be at the conversation level and then other students are still working on isolation. It may be the same sound, but that's a really tricky session to run when students are at totally different steps in the hierarchy of articulation. So this is great because it's that individual one-on-one therapy, but so quick. And teachers love it because the students are missing significantly less instruction time, which is so important, especially if they just are getting speech, just for articulation and don't have any language concerns. So, but there's lots of benefits. Should we talk about the benefits?
Yeah,
too?
let's do. You put a perfect segue in there, so go for it.
Yeah. I would say that probably is the biggest benefit, though, is that kids are missing way less instruction time with the Speedy Speech model. And like Callie said, we have some, some research, some resources that we've been looking into before doing this live. And there was, one thing that we looked at. Students had, they had more minutes for traditional speech therapy, But then when the kids who did this Speedy Speech, they had obviously about half the amount of time of therapy and still met their goal in about, I think it was 9.5 months versus 18 months in
Like
traditional speech therapy.
literally time.
Right, like significant difference. So if we think about all those minutes where kids are spending time in the classroom instead, so that makes us very excited as service providers that we're able to see progress for these kids while they're still getting the curriculum. So super, super important. So I would say that is probably the biggest benefit. Would you agree?
I exactly since we're school-based SLPs, our primary purpose as school-based SLPs is to make sure that children access the curriculum. And if we're taking them out of the classroom more than is needed,
Right.
then are we, you know what I mean? It's kind of like what you said. Are we really able to? I'm like trying to read these comments as they come up, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good point too, because I think with traditional therapy, we do have to be really careful in giving, that standard amount of minutes to every kid for articulation, because we have to, like you said, our services we have to be able to prove that their articulation isn't impacting their ability to access the curriculum. And I'm going to be honest, a lot of the time with one speech sound, it doesn't, unless it's impacting reading or writing, maybe. But a lot of times when kids are just working on R, or just working on S, they're not really having a lot of impact to that curriculum. So that's why it's important that we're not giving them a lot of minutes when we don't really need to be. So.
Exactly. And I don't know about you, and I don't know about everyone else listening, but for example, a lot of my groups, well, all my groups, because I see all of my kids in groups and in fairly large groups, mixed large groups at that. So sometimes when I think about how I'm being like affected, like if I'm seeing the kid in a large mixed group and they're not making a lot of progress, I mean, that's actually what drove me to start really using Speedy Speech, is because I got to this point where I was like, yes, everyone is making progress, but it's so laboriously slow that I'm not able to dismiss students as fast as they're coming in.
Right.
And
Right.
so I swapped over little by little and put people into this Speedy Speech model to see how it went. And it was just like night and day different, largely because for these particular students, right? I'm talking about a particular group because for me, this is how I chose as a clinician what was the best service delivery model for a certain student.
Right.
For some students, they might be just fine in that large group.
Mm-hmm.
And if so, like it's fine. But I just had a lot of kids that I didn't feel like were maximizing their potential, and I was able to do it in a more efficient way with Speedy Speech.
Right, right. Well, and especially if you think about if the mixed group, if there's language going on too, I feel like sometimes speech can be put on the back burner because we're focusing so heavily on language a lot of the time. So this program is great for that too, because we get that individual time to focus on speech. But you kind of mentioned too who this program is good for. We talked about it a little bit, but yeah, kids that usually have mild or moderate articulation or fluency concerns, it's just not going to be appropriate for every kid. Kids with pretty severe phonological impairments, I do not use this program for, just because they're needing a lot of that phonology instruction and really a lot more mass practice than what Speedy Speech can provide. So I typically do not do this program for kids that have phonological impairments, and that are kids that are unintelligible too. That's really important too. But I have also used it for students with fluency for studying behaviors. So maybe we'll start out with like more of the traditional amount of minutes for stuttering, especially when you're first starting, a lot of education and fluency therapy. But then as we kind of, they're more comfortable with their stutter, they have their strategies, we can kind of transition more to this model, and it's more used as a check-in. Okay, what happened this week? Do you have like any big presentations or projects that you're working on? And it's a great way to try and transition the student to getting a little bit less minutes, but not completely dismissing them.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think in addition, so like I feel like it's so multifactorial. Anytime you're using a service delivery model, right? You're looking at multiple factors.
Mm-hmm.
And so look at things like what Speedy Speech is generally used with. But for example, and that's what the vast majority of kids, like for me, they were like residual errors are fairly mild to moderate, or my older kids who I think purposely didn't focus or care because they liked getting out of class to go to speech and play a game.
Right.
And so I changed the service delivery model because I'm like, we're not playing this game anymore.
Right.
So I mean, things like that. But I think there are just so many factors because I, like you, would not generally take someone who has, I mean, like a phonological disorder. But I do have two kids that I decided to do it with, but it was because with their certain situation, they were in a fairly large group. It was 25 minutes twice a week. They
Yeah.
couldn't focus long enough for it to be effective. And so I decided to try it out. And sometimes Speedy Speech isn't for everyone, but you might as well try it out because it works.
Yeah.
It will probably work really well.
Well, and that's what's great about this delivery model, because you can be flexible. Like, so if most of my students that I use it with, I just do 5-minute sessions. But
Right.
if you do have a student that, they have maybe a couple more sounds than just one, if they need 10 minutes twice a week, you can do that too. So you can be flexible and kind of, what you're willing to provide for that student if you think they would be good for a Speedy Speech fit.
I totally agree. And I guess it's like, if you can't tell, I keep zooming back to this ultimate theme of we're giving you principles, but you just need to, not you, but like everyone listening, right, needs to consider each child and the factors that they bring to the table, not just like one,
Right.
which is why I think we're discussing multiple factors that hopefully you all can consider. And I'm looking here to make sure I don't miss too many questions. Something that you were just talking about, so this might be good to hit. So like on IEPs, do you write the minutes by day or week? And maybe you and I can both share how we have tackled. You can go first.
Okay, so mine's a little bit different in my district. Well, our kids in the Speedy Speech program are actually not on IEPs. We do not consider it special education minutes. So it's more of a program or a service that we offer, since that one sound a lot of the time is not impacting their ability to access the curriculum. So ours is more of a program, and how we do that in my district, we have all our kind of official documents that have been created by other SLPs in the district, and we do have to get parental permission to screen the student, and then permission to enroll them in the program. Progress reports still go home, not every quarter, but every semester. So there is, it's still like a formal program. It's not just like, oh, great, you're in Speedy Speech now. There's still some formal structure behind it. But our students are not on IEPs who are in the Speedy Speech program. So that would have to be something that your whole district would be willing to adopt and get on board with. But I will say it does save us SLPs in my district a significant amount of time and paperwork. Significant. I currently right now only case manage one student. So that within itself is amazing, because all that paperwork gets really tedious, especially when you're just working on that one sound. So that saves us a lot of time in paperwork, and so I can focus on other things like therapy planning and all the meetings and everything.
Exactly. I was like, for all those kids that like you case managed one, I was like, wow, I can't imagine. I case managed 40. So I'm like, it not only all that paperwork, but it's like you got to hold the IEP meetings and any other meetings that may come with it. So something like that, if you had, and it kind of sounds similar. I know some schools implement it in kind of like an RTI or MTSS approach, where that's like the tier 2 intervention.
Yeah.
I was like, you started spinning for a second, so I was like, oh no, is it my phone? Okay, no, we're good. But no, I like it that way for many reasons, because let's be honest, I think a lot of kids do qualify for special education for like articulation or speech sound disorders, despite the fact that there's not a real academic impact. And maybe yet, but there really isn't, but we just qualify them, especially if there's not like a program like you have in place, or like a tier 2 intervention or RTI program that's in place. But I agree, if that was implemented, it would save so much time.
Right. That's how our district kind of views it as an intervention versus that special education minutes. So and of course, if the student is not making progress in speedy speech, like it is just not working, then of course we can talk about a speech only IEP and get them to that step. But yeah, the one student I case manage, he is my phonological student who just needs a lot of support with phonology. So that's kind of why, because he's very unintelligible to his peers and teachers. So that's why we're there with him.
For sure. I guess I'll give my two
Um,
cents. I do use my
yeah,
kids. And I mean, my kids are all on IEPs, or all my Speedy Speech
yeah,
kids. My district doesn't currently have a program like this. So my service delivery model is Speedy Speech within an IEP context. I personally wish that I could write monthly minutes or a certain number of like 5-minute sessions per month or per like grading period. I think that would give me flexibility.
mhm,
However, my district requires that we write them like weekly or really per 3 weeks. And so the way I write it is essentially that I'm seeing them 3 times for 5 minutes each week.
right.
But that's just because that's my district preference. But I think in an ideal world, if I like ran the world and could choose, you know, I would probably write it monthly because it gives you the ability to, maybe do it like boom, 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 3 days in a row, 5 minutes. And then you want to see what happens if I give them a week off or I only do one session. Can they retain those skills? And then, I feel like it gives you more flexibility as a clinician.
For sure.
Um, but that's like, I know some districts are more trusting of the way that you write your service minutes and you
Right.
implement. Some are more um, picky, or like they have their preferences on how you write minutes. So
Right. And like one question that I got was like, how do you schedule 5-minute speech sessions? Like that seems impossible. And I will tell you, it is very fast paced. But the way I do it personally, I do it in chunks. So for example, I might say all of second grade, I'm going to see you from 11 to, I'll email all the second grade teachers this. I will see your student anytime from 11 to 11:30 for 5 minutes. So that way, if I go to this teacher's classroom and that student I was going to see is absent, I can just move on to the next second grade classroom. And I'm not worried about it being exact, within that 5 minutes. But I will say sometimes I do have to set a timer on like my iPad to like a 5-minute timer or 7-minute timer or something, because sometimes when you're working with those kids, you're in a group but you're like, oh, nope, got to see the next one. So it is pretty fast paced. But sometimes I like that too. So.
I do too. And I think once the kids also get in the groove, they know that they come to work hard for 5 minutes and then
Yep.
they're done. So it's like you get a lot of bang for your buck. And like sometimes when I compare, I'm like, how much time were they getting in a mixed group of 5? Probably like 2 minutes each session. They were getting, specifically for them. I was like, I'm doing better now seeing them one-on-one for 5 minutes.
Oh,
So
I agree. I agree, especially because we can just drill and drill and get so many trials. I mean, you would be shocked how many trials you can get in 5 minutes, especially if you have some sort of like cards, or I do it on my iPad and we just swipe, swipe, swipe. And the kids love the iPad. They think they're like so cool for getting to do speech on an iPad. So I travel and I actually do this program in the hallways a lot of the time. So I pull the kid out, work for 5 minutes, push him back in. So we don't even go to my room a lot of the time.
I was gonna say, and there's certainly flexibility in how you do that. And I know some people are bigger on like, and I don't know, I didn't say that we were gonna discuss this, but in case there's any people here who this applies to, like with FERPA and privacy, some people are more like, please don't pull them into the hallway. And in
Yeah,
that case, it'd be like, okay, well maybe we're gonna go on a walk, or
right.
maybe you can go outside, or maybe that like in my school there's like little workrooms that are at the end of each
Yep.
hallway,
Hmm.
and so you can walk there. So I guess technically you should consider, if you're at this approach, where you are going to be doing it, because depending on where your speech room is, if you're taking 5 minutes to walk to your speech room and then walk back, it's no longer efficient for you anymore.
Right. Right. Yeah,
So
like with my kindergarten student, I actually push in and see him because transitioning in kindergarten is just, we know that can be. So I'll just go in and work with him in the back of the classroom, and the teacher is totally fine with that. Whereas a sixth grade student that I did have didn't like the whole hallway thing, so we would go find a private room, or I've just asked, hey, today, like, where do we feel like working, just somewhere close by that was close to their room that we could work. And since, our program is not considered special education, we have a little bit more leeway on where we can provide those services too. So you just have to be mindful of how your district has, what they're offering, either a program or on IEP minutes for Speedy Speech. So
Absolutely. We're not missing. I'm like, checking. We're doing good. We're like plowing through this.
Yeah. And another question that I got that I just thought of. So for ours, I got some questions about like the referral. Since it's not an IEP, I got some questions how we do like referral and dismissal. A lot of times it's just this teacher comes up to us. We try to do in my building a lot of education on like what sounds are considered developmentally appropriate or not. So that way the teachers kind of know when to come up to us, like, hey, my kid's at this age and they still can't make their R sound. Like they should have it by now, right? Or sometimes, we're just walking past in the hallway and we're like, oh, when you hear it, you don't want to hear it, but you're like, I heard it. So we will just kind of make sure we keep in touch with the teachers. And that's when the permission to screen form goes home, and so on and so forth from there. But our dismissal process, again, since they're not on IEPs, the goal for all of our students in Speedy Speech program is to try to produce their sound with 80% accuracy or higher across 3 data days in a conversation. So once they're able to kind of do that, we know that they can start practicing this skill at home and generalizing it in the classroom. And our program too relies on homework with the parents, just knowing that if you don't practice this anywhere else besides with me, we're not going to see that generalization that we want. So we try to we send, fun little activities home, nothing too difficult, but
something to hopefully give them a plug to even think about it. Sometimes I'm just happy if my kid thinks about working on their
same.
Not, so I love that too, because I started sending things home and some of my kids love it. Like I just send home little, I don't know, I think I got it from like Speechy Musings, but it's like just a little sheet and I send it home, and some kids just like love to do it and they think it's the coolest thing, and some kids I send it home and it comes back blank, but they're like, well, I showed my dad, and I'm like, well,
yeah.
That's
or sometimes I'll just be like, we're here for a second. Sometimes I'll just tell my kids too, all right, work on this word for the week. Like if it's a sibling's name or like a best friend's name, I'm like, that's your target word for next time I see you. So yes, let's see some of our questions. So yes, one of the questions, didn't realize it's a program. So yes, Callie says her kids are on IEPs that do Speedy Speech. So hers is more of a service delivery model. And in my district, we have an actual program and our kids are not on IEPs. So totally a district decision how you implement Speedy Speech, but it's really available for whoever wants to use it. Do you recommend any teachers pay teachers resources to use with Speedy Speech? What do you think, Callie? Do you have any ones that you love?
I have like a big, I don't know that I think it's good for everything, including Speedy Speech. I think I have like a high frequency word bundle from Speedy Musings, and it has, and then it also has stuff from like isolation syllables up to like conversation and fun stuff. And so I think it helps me also take into consideration like principles of motor learning as I'm doing that, and I can use different cities and different things like that. And it's just really easy. It's a pretty big bundle. Yeah. I've never really had to buy anything else. And so I don't have anything else to really compare it to, but I do use something from Speechy Musings and we can share it after. What about you?
Speechy Musings has a really good freebie too for like cues, like speech cues. She has like the mouths. So those are my Speedy Speech bag. I have a little bag that I run around with. Those are my bag along with a mirror and face shields. The workbook Step Up to R That's a really, really good program for working on the R sound. We can link that or mention it in the comments after. And then another thing, I guess, sorry, some of these are not teachers pay teachers things. These are just things I have in my bag. But one thing I really like is the Articulation Station app.
Yeah.
Um, just because you don't have to carry around a bunch of cards for each sound. You can just carry your iPad and then just kind of swipe through the targets that way, which is nice.
I was gonna say things like that are convenient are important. And again, not to like make people be like, I need to think so much about this, but having your some kind of material ready to go makes
Yeah.
Speedy effective. Because if you have to take so much time to be like, okay, wait, what was I gonna do here? And then you realize 3 minutes has gone by and you've got
Yeah.
2 minutes left. So even if you just have something really easy, like honestly, whether it's articulation station and you're just swiping through, or sometimes I'll bring so like Speech and Musings has like a high frequency word list. And honestly, I'll just like start at the top of the list and be like, let's see how many we can get down. And if we're working on like a word level, I might do 10 productions of each word, and then we're going to put in a sentence, and then 10 productions of each word, and then put in a sentence. And I just see where we get down. And once it hits 5 minutes, I stop it and I put brackets around what we did. I date it.
Yep.
I have data, and then I put it in my binder, or not my binder. I have one of those like clipboards that opens, and I just shove it in there.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's not a right or wrong way to do it, but
No.
just you can.
But I think that's another reason why it's so great is because there's not a lot of planning that goes into Speedy Speech, since once you kind of know what sound the student's working on and where they're at, you can kind of just boom, boom, boom. So that's another huge benefit too. You don't have to spend a lot of time planning your sessions because you're only with them for 5 minutes. So
Exactly. Did I miss something here? No, we're good. As I yeah, I'm like writing notes here, so it's like we can share resources like that, or like I don't know, maybe you can make a cool reel about like what's in my Speedy Speech bag. Like that would be
I should. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Another thing, a hot thing that kids love is that clicker. Click, 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 click.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, how many clicks are we gonna get to today? I don't know why, but kids think that is like the most fun thing in the world. So especially if they're at the word level, like you're like, oh, let's see how many clicks we can get to in 5 minutes. I don't think you can do it. So that's a huge motivator for my students too.
And they love to get high scores. It's like last time you got this many, can we get more? Granted, of course, we have to be like, okay, let's not go so fast that we're not accurate anymore.
Right.
There's like that, they can sustain attention long enough for that 5 minutes. But it's like it's super accurate. Like I think my high score kid is probably like 85 correct production.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mine probably actually go more between like 45 and 60.
Yeah.
But some kids are just like,
I would agree with that, though. Around those numbers is how many productions you can get in. But that's why I like it too, because you can spend a couple sessions if you need just on educating, like watch, this is what we do for the L sound. We lift our tongue up, practice, looking in the mirror. And then, you spend 5 minutes doing that. And then the next session, you're like, all right, let's, add some vowels with our L sound. And so it's just that it's so nice because it gives that student that individual time they need to really. And sometimes in groups, we just miss that. We miss when a kid is stuck on, the syllables and we just go straight to words just because we're busy in the groups and we're trying to manage everything and do the plan. And so it just is so nice to kind of know where the student's at.
I totally agree. Looking at some more questions here that I had on here. Here's one that I don't know if we like explicitly hit, and I'll give my 2 cents and then you can give yours.
Okay.
Does this work for preschool age students? I'm not going to make any statements on whether it works or not. I personally don't have any kids that I see on IEPs that I use this with. And for me, that's primarily because most of those kids, for me, need something more play-based, and we're not working necessarily on play-based types things. Not that you couldn't maybe involve some kind of play, but it's a lot harder to do kind of follow their lead, but structure it enough that it's play for younger, my 3, 4, borderline 5-year-olds. And so I don't use it, but I don't know if anyone has, but I'm not saying it won't work.
Yeah.
You have that you weighed all of the pros and cons and you're like, this implementation approach might work for the student,
Right.
I say try it. But in general, I don't, for the reasons that I just said.
Yeah, yeah. I do not work with preschool. I am kindergarten through sixth grade, and I know in our district, I don't believe that they use it at the preschool level, just because I think a big factor of preschool children too is attention, and so it can be really hard to get that attention. 5 minutes. I mean, it might work. It just kind of depends on the kid, right? But I think a lot of the research and the resources are with school age children as well. But again, it might be in the works of the research with preschool. I'm not sure on that one, but
Yeah.
Usually preschool children have a lot more than one sound that we're working on.
Much more phonological than just straight articulation.
Right.
And again, not that like you can't put like a phonological kid in Speedy Speech, but the factors for most of my preschoolers, it's better for me to see them, maybe in like a little play-based group than it is for me to try to do Speedy Speech.
Right. Because then the words are really functional for them to, focusing on that play-based routine. Yeah.
So, I mean, the people who asked me, because I had like 3 or 4 people ask me about preschoolers, if you want to try it and you think, based on all your child factors that it's a good option, I say try it.
Well, especially if articulation is mild. I mean, if it's mild, moderate, maybe, you have a lot of language goals with them, but then you're like, oh, they just have this one sound that, typically a 4-year-old has by now. I mean, you could definitely give it a go.
You just push into the classroom while they're having their little and do your play-based therapy in there. And then again, if they're not responding to that 5-minute quick intervention, it's just data to say they need something more intensive, which I think is why I like doing different service delivery models, and why in an ideal world I would love it to be like the tier 2 intervention, because that way there's plenty of kids who I think just need something like Speedy Speech and they don't need a full IEP. I think that they resolve a lot of their errors just with Speedy Speech, but those kids that don't make that same quick progress, that's just more data to say they need a more individualized or more intensive program. So in an ideal world, that is how kind of like in your situation, that's how I would. But
yeah, because if we think about it, that would be least restrictive, and we're always trying to get to that least restrictive environment. So yeah, definitely.
Do you have any more questions? I'm like looking.
Yeah, let me see. I think we hit most of them. Yeah, I think I hit all the questions that I got. If anyone has any more questions that's watching, just drop them in the comments and we will try to get to those. But it looks like we got to most of them.
I was going to say, we hit this one. Can you do it with articulation or phonology? And I think we kind of touched on that. The Speedy Speech or quick artic programs to do this. No, you can if you want to, but no. Oh, someone asked me, is this service delivery model only good or practiced in the schools? Or if I'm EI or private practice, can I do this? My 2 cents is I feel like it's efficient for a school-based SLP because I have access to the kids and I can just go grab them. Whereas I don't know in private practice if I would want to come drop off my kid for just 5 minutes every day. I don't know if like, unless you lived right next door and you were just gonna have your kid walk over to speech for 5 minutes, I don't know if the benefits outweigh.
And it might be weird about like billing too. Like if you bill in your private practice, if they need to be there for a certain amount of minutes per day per session.
It must not have a billable disability, or need if they're only coming to you for 5 minutes.
Right. But check with your private practice or where you work. Talking to the director would always be the best option there.
I agree. I'm like, the short answer is I assume it would be equally effective for any student or any child given regardless of setting. I just don't know factors related to setting, if it's like worth it to try to do like these quick 5-minute things. I think most of it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I obviously haven't like read everything on Speedy Speech, but I feel like the way that the intervention approach or like the model came to be was because there were so many school-based SLPs that were like, there's so much going on and I don't feel like I can be super effective. And I said, you know, let's, what other things can we do? See if we can be more effective with our
And
time.
yeah, that. And I think SLPs, school-based SLPs, were just realizing how long these kids were staying on an IEP for
Yeah,
just a few speech sounds. And they're like, these kids have been on an IEP for way too long. And like progress is there, but it's slow. Like, how can we get progress much faster? So that's why, trying to get that parent or family involvement, or even, maybe if home life is hard, even getting like a peer or someone in class that they can practice with. I've done that before too. If they have, 5 minutes of downtime at the end of the day, getting a peer to practice their sound. Of course, a peer that has the sound. Don't want to pair them with pair them with a peer that does not have the sound. So that's always an option too.
and I was like, literally anything I feel like I can do to get them to even think about their speech sound outside of being with me, I feel like is a win. And so something I started doing this year is sometimes like every once in a while. So like, and this I guess would depend on how your school is set up, but like my school is set up where it's like there's two grade levels per hallway. And so sometimes I'll just go grab everyone for like 20 minutes and we'll sit together and be like, we're gonna have an accountability buddy check,
Yeah.
because they see each other all day and they've been in speech with each other for
Right.
how long. And so every once in a while, we'll just combine everyone's minutes
Yeah.
and stand together and be like, okay, we're all going to be accountable. So when you see that person, you're going to think, oh, I have to work on my whatever sound. And obviously I don't have like a control and I haven't, controlled for all of the variables that could be going on. But I think planting that in their heads and having them see people all day, I think it has helped their
Yeah.
thought process or like, their awareness
Yeah.
outside of speech. So I mean, and that's easy too. It's just like when you see these people, which you see every day, it
Yeah.
makes your brain think about it, which you wouldn't have done otherwise.
Right. Pointing that sound out all the time definitely is something that is going to have a big impact.
For sure. I'm like looking at all these questions. Oh, people maybe weren't here when we talked about like frequency and times a week. I think you and I probably do similar things. Like I personally like mine as basically 5 minutes, 3 times a week. But you could probably do somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, 2 to 4 times a week, just depending on.
Yeah. That's what I would say. I think our maximum really is like 20 minutes a week, but you can break that up however you want. So like 2 10 minutes or 4 5 minutes. Most of my students are 2 5-minute sessions a week just because we really want them to be practicing outside of our services too. So that's usually what we do. But if they're, needing a little bit more, you can throw an extra 5 minutes and it works out pretty good. So.
Yes. And I don't know if anyone who is either listening to this or will be listening to this later when it's recorded. I don't know how, like, my admin at first, because everyone doesn't understand our clinical decisions, right? So when I decided that I wanted to do Speedy Speech, the only thing they saw or perceived it as they're like, that's a big decrease in service time. So they're like, whoa, you just went from this kid getting 50 minutes a week to 15. They're like, this kid still has a lot of issues.
Mm.
Oh, and sometimes it just takes you being confident and knowing that you're making clinical decisions that are based on multifactorial parts of this individual kid, and that this implementation approach is effective and maybe more effective than what they're currently doing. And so I think sometimes knowing your why with this approach, if you do get some pushback from people that are in charge of you, knowing your why and being able to make that case makes this transition a lot better, because honestly all they see is 50 minutes and now you're down to 15 minutes and they kind of, for good reason, understand why you were doing different things.
Right.
But when I explain it to like parents and other people, they're like, that makes more sense. And of course, like teachers are totally on board.
Right, yeah. Teachers and a lot of times parents too, because it's individualized. And so they're like, oh, okay, they're get that, time with you one on one. And that's why we see progress usually at a faster rate because of that one on one. So I always mention that too, because it's in a one on one setting. So it really benefits the student.
I agree. See, I think we like hit.
Yeah. Did we get them all?
I'm like, looking here. I think we did.
I think so. I got all mine answered.
I'll say I think we pretty much hit our bases. And if someone is listening to this now or later and they decide, oh wait, I do have a question, then just either comment on the recorded live or DM either of us.
Yeah.
We would be more than happy to chat more about it.
And it's so interesting because we do Speedy Speech a little bit differently. So that kind of goes to show how doing Speedy Speech can be really flexible and it can work for lots of different environments and different ages. So I think that goes a lot to show, how great the program and the service is.
So for everyone, if you need to find Natalie, her handle Sweet PSLP, right?
Yeah, that's it.
It's like I'm not telling you the wrong thing, right?
No, Sweet PSLV, you got it.
Perfect. And she's awesome. So follow her, and I know she's a wealth of knowledge. So
Well, thank you, Callie. Thanks so much for having me on this live. This was so much fun. I love chatting with you, and it was great that we actually got to be on here and kind of see each other's faces and get to chat with everybody. So thanks so much.
for sure. I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thanks. You too, girl.
Bye.
Bye.